Welcome into the GSMC Sports Podcast for our final segment of the show today. We've been all about the NBA playoffs today, and now we are going to be looking at the biggest storylines headed into the next couple months in the NBA. And I wanted to start by talking about the Milwaukee Bucks. And there's definitely an argument to be made in terms of championship aspirations and the cores and the pressure to succeed this offseason from a national media standpoint. The Celtics are probably the team under the most pressure, but I do feel like from an organizational standpoint and the turmoil that could build up, I think that the Bucks are actually at biggest risk of having some drastic changes in the future, where we saw them really choose to upend their identity and having some key pieces of the organization see their way out following their upset after getting upset by the Miami Heat in the first round last season. Mind you, this was a playoff series where Giannis played only half of the minutes, walked into a Jimmy Butler masterclass where he averaged something close to 40 points per game, probably closer to the 35 mark, but went absolutely berserk in that first round of the playoffs, and they fire both their head coach, Mike Budenholzer, and they decide to make this splash move, trading for Damian Lillard, and in doing so, they move off of Jrue Holiday, who was another staple of the Bucks championship team in 2021. Now, I understand that this Lillard move also was in part to try and convince Giannis that the team was convinced on their chances to win moving forward. They were sort of trying to sell Giannis after Giannis sort of gave some hints of, well, maybe I don't end up here my entire career. I want to be in an organization where we're committed to winning. And they go out and swing on a player like Damian Lillard very shortly after Giannis signs his contract extension. So I don't think that can totally be overlooked as part of this move. But again, a lot of big time changes in the moment there with Budenholzer and Holiday both going out. They bring in Adrian Griffin, who flames out. Again, flames out can be a little bit of an exaggeration. I don't know how you would describe necessarily the Griffin term in Milwaukee. It wasn't about their regular season success because they were winning games, but the locker room did not seem to be bought in necessarily, and it was a very, there was just a lot going on there. They now bring in Doc Rivers, who's been a very polarizing coach amongst the NBA media over these past couple years. He signs I think a multi-year contract with them. I could be wrong about that. Feel free to fact check me if I am. But if they end up getting upset in the first round, let's just say hypothetically to the Pacers, are they making another coaching change? Again, I'll have to look into how long Doc Rivers is going to be with the Bucks, but they could end up having to be, he's on board through the 2026-27 season, I believe, and that means if they were to move on from him, they could be paying 4 head coaches at once. I'm not sure when the Budenholzer money officially expires, but again, tons of money that they've been filing into their head coaches over the past couple years, and they've really sort of limited their flexibility because of this Lillard move. Where do you go from here moving forward in terms of, again, that sort of pressure to succeed? From the media, it is the Boston Celtics, where they've been in this spot a handful of different times, and if they fall again, they probably will have to make some type of move. Not exactly sure what that is, as they did just sign Jrue Holiday to a contract extension. Maybe it's firing head coach Joe Mazzulla. Maybe it's a Jalen Brown trade, which I don't think is very likely after the season that Brown has had. But again, it's a possibility. But as for the Bucks, I feel like it becomes a very dicey situation there. And also on the note of Lillard, I think it's unfair necessarily to sort of put this massive weight on his shoulders as he is getting up there in age. He is 33 years old. He's going to be 34 by the start of next season. So maybe it's unfair probably to, put this massive pressure on him to be the guy to lead them to postseason success. But at the same time, he he stuck around with Portland far longer than he probably should have, and that was out of loyalty, so I'm not going to criticize him over that. But then he did sort of start to make a little bit of a deal of it at the end there, and the Bucks ended up paying a big price to go and get him. And now he is, seen a significant drop-off, and he's in his, a little bit more, I wouldn't say quite twilight years, but he's in the final stretch of his career, and I don't think that he has that same level of being able to single-handedly carry a team to a conference finals like he did with Portland during his prime there. But he is somebody who's probably going to be catching a lot of flack if they don't have postseason success this year, and is just something I'm definitely going to be looking at to see how they decide to manage the pressure in that situation as a whole moving forward. But like I did sort of allude to a couple times there, the Boston Celtics are the team in terms of the media perspective. The number one pressure, is this the season that they actually come through? The Eastern Conference is just about as light as it has been during the tenure of Jalen Brown and Jason Tatum. And it's not to say that if they don't win it all this season, their window is closed, because it is very much still open. But the path has never been easier. I think that the only team that realistically should beat them in a series is the Denver Nuggets. But even with that, the Celtics have completely loaded up for this season, and if they don't end up winning it all this year, there's tons of questions about, okay, well, what is it actually going to get it done for them? Is Jason Tatum capable of being a number one on a championship team? How does Jalen Brown fit into the picture long term? And for a very expensive roster, it just becomes a very fascinating conversation moving forward. The other team in the East, again, I wouldn't say pressure-wise necessarily, but I'm just curious to see how much longer can this Jalen Brunson Knicks thing go for them, where the playoff seeding ends up breaking out great for them. I like them against either the 76ers or the Heat, whoever comes out of that play-in tournament. They are equipped defensively to beat either one of them. The Joel Embiid matchup could be difficult, but they do have a rotation of big men in Mitchell Robinson, who's been working his way back from injury, that he could be a big piece there, but Isaiah Hartenstein is really the one who's going to likely get the big minutes for them, and he's been playing very well, but I think they could definitely hold up. And especially if Embiid is limited, Jalen Brunson is probably the best player, at least offensively, in the series for them. How much longer can he carry the Knicks in this fashion, where, as much as I said, the rest of the roster has really developed into their roles in a positive way, it is Jalen Brunson that is the number one option, and the number two, I don't really know who is a creator offensively outside of that. Again, I like the Knicks roster, but the way that they're currently constructed, it was supposed to be Julius Randle, and they're without him. And if there is going to be a moment, especially if they run into a Miami, which would be a very good defensive matchup, I think, between both of these teams, and the Heat's offense isn't the most intimidating thing in the world, but they do have a couple guys on the ball in Terry Rozier and Tyler Hero that can maybe make things work, and that's outside of talking about Jimmy Butler himself. But I think that it's going to be very much on Jalen Brunson's shoulders to carry the Knicks through these first couple rounds here, and a handful of people are going to be picking them to make the finals. I don't know if I'm there, but at the same time, same as I talked about with the Celtics, this is a very open Eastern Conference, and I'm just curious to see Jalen Brunson. This is a massive inflection point as far as, his legacy and just how special this season is. It is special, at least from a vibes perspective, of the fact that he won over the entire state of New York, and he was able to put his stamp on making his first ever All-Star game, and that he deserves to be in these All-NBA considerations. But to, what heights can this reach? Is this just going to be a feel-good story? I talked about earlier how Bill Simmons made the comparison to the Isaiah Thomas season with the Boston Celtics. I think I said 18-19 or something then. It was the 16-17 season, I believe, where Isaiah Thomas was averaging 30 and taking over the fourth quarters, like we've seen Jalen Brunson do in a lot of these big-time games. Or is it going to be a flash in the pan, or is this something to stay? Should be very interesting to see. In terms of the Western Conference, I feel like the Clippers storyline is one that a lot of people are sort of shooing off at this point. That it is this collection of sort of aged stars that are past their prime, but it does still feel like, we saw them even as early as this year during their dominant stretch, that they can be one of the best teams in the league. It's a matter of, though, do you buy into that version of the Clippers or the one that we've seen this post-All-Star break that hasn't been quite as locked in and has definitely staggered at times? I think a lot of people are overlooking the Clippers. I just picked the Mavericks to beat them as well, so I'm partially guilty of this as well. But I'm also not ready to sort of fully turn the page. Can this team stay fully healthy, and what type of damage can they do if that is the case? Or, unfortunately, are we just past that point at this point of all of their careers? Also in the West, I am definitely looking at the historical aspect of the Denver Nuggets and if they're able to pull off the repeat. Felt like last year this is a team that is very much capable of repeating the way that they are built, the way that they still have their same starting five from last year in their core, and the type of offense that they run is just very easy to sort of plug guys into, and that's why we've seen some of these young players be able to develop and thrive in the situation. But we could definitely be having some, all-time legacy conversations. For Jokic, things are what they are anyways, and I don't really want to dive into the player perspective of it because that discourse is always toxic. But for this Nuggets run here, could be, inching towards that dynasty level. Now, typically, it's got to be 3 championships. It wouldn't just be the back-to-back, but they are in a great position both this season and moving forward in my eyes. And they're the best team in the league as I currently see things. So definitely curious about that. And then the last thing is the idea of, are we going to see any of these young stars fully emerge? We at length talked about the idea of who was the next face of the NBA around the All-Star break. You have 2 of those prime candidates, and really 3 even if you want to include Jason Tatum from the East, but Shai Gilgeous-Alexander and Anthony Edwards. And again, if you want to throw Tatum in that conversation, 3 players on top seeds in their conferences with very solid chances to make some noise during the postseason and emerge as the next big candidate for the face of the league. I think that Anthony Edwards probably has the closest chance as things currently stand, but winning obviously plays a big part of it. Oklahoma City is possibly a year away in my eyes, but, he could definitely, SGA that is, could have his coming out party with a big time performance, especially if they do end up getting matched up against the Lakers and everybody counts them out and he, dominates his way into a postseason run here could be very interesting. There is also another name that I didn't even mention in that top three, is the fact that Luka Doncic, I know it feels like he's, been in the NBA longer than he has, just because from the minute he's came into the league, he's been so good. But if he's able to lead some sort of a run with the Mavericks as well, we could be having some conversations with him as well. But let me know what you are looking forward to most in the upcoming NBA playoffs. We will be providing tons of in-depth coverage as the games progress here. But for now, we are going to be ending the show. Thank you very much for tuning into the GSMC Sports Podcast. Thank you to the GSMC Sports Network for allowing us to host this show. We are live from 2 to 3 Eastern every weekday. So we will be back tomorrow afternoon, and we will see you then. Thanks for tuning in.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of shit, and the coffee ain't hit yet, damn, ain't that